He came up huge and hit the big three.
Absolutely.
And guess what? They are going back to Philadelphia.
Yeah, you got a lot of momentum.
I mean, Embiid was okay last night. Again, stats are like, if you just look at he got a triple-double, you're watching the game. I mean, to be honest with you, he didn't play that well again.
No. A lot of critical turnovers, too.
Yeah, but that's why the assist part on the triple-double, you're like, he had a lot of turnovers. But he did enough. Maxey did a ton.
Yeah.
And, look, the Knicks have the thing wrapped up. They have it wrapped up. They're up 6. They're up 6.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? The Sixers got them. Then beat them in overtime. Let's give them credit because that team was given up for lost going into the night. It was just going to be punch the card and move to the next round. Nope. And it's interesting because I felt like outside of Maxey, the other guys didn't play well.
No.
Harris
played okay.
Hey, yeah. Oubre, maybe. Batum, okay. I mean, that's all it is.
Payne, I think, is giving him good minutes.
But
he has that. He's obviously got the championship experience.
Now they have a shot. They get to go back home, get a chance to tie the series, and then go from there. It was a terrific win for Philadelphia last night. Meanwhile, the Kansas City Chiefs may still be the Kansas City Chiefs, but they may not be the Kansas City, Missouri Chiefs. Some Kansas lawmakers now see a chance to lure both of Kansas City's professional teams to the other side of the border. To the other side of the border. No, we're not talking about Guadalajara. Every time I do, I think it's because of the shirt.
Might be.
God, are the letters on the thing big enough?
They might be. Yeah.
God, I mean, is this what you use for the eye chart?
No, I'd still fail it.
That's a P. That's an H. Right. Of course, see, part of your problem is you had to memorize how to spell Phillies.
That's tough.
To pass. All right. So they have gone through the process here of putting it to vote on a tax proposition on the Missouri side, and it failed. Now, it failed in part because the Royals want to move out of Kaufman, abandon it. They want to go downtown. But they've picked 3 spots downtown. They haven't settled on a spot. Nobody's happy about any of the spots they picked, so the vote failed. So, members of the Republican-controlled legislature in Kansas pushed a bill yesterday that would have allowed Kansas officials to authorize at least $1 billion in bonds to cover the entire cost of building each a new stadium, paying off the debt with tax revenues generated in the area over 30 years. GOP leaders, though, did not bring it up for a vote because lawmakers adjourned their annual session early today. Some critics have derided the plan as corporate welfare. Others were receptive but didn't want to pass the proposal until the legislature approved a broad package of tax cuts for their constituents that Democratic Governor Laura Kelly would sign, which didn't happen either. So other than that, a very productive session in Topeka. Legislators' work on the plan began in earnest behind the scenes because of what happened in Missouri. The bill's biggest champion is Kansas House Commerce Committee Chair Sean Tarwater, a Kansas City area Republican. I mean Kansas City, Kansas area Republican, okay? Remember, 2 Kansas cities. He said supporters want to give the 2 professional sports teams another option should they contemplate leaving Missouri, which he said would be devastating for both states. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, Tarwater said. We need them to stay in the Metroplex. So his idea is, hey, look, go across from Kansas City, Missouri to Kansas City, Kansas. That way you at least keep the teams. The Chiefs aren't going anywhere.
Not a chance.
So the idea, quote, is not dead. Kelly and her staff signaled Tuesday that she likely would veto the last tax package lawmakers approved, cutting income, sales, and property taxes by a total of $1.5 billion over the next 3 years. Lawmakers expect Kelly to call a special session of the legislature to try and get lawmakers to pass a tax plan that she will accept, and they could consider the stadium financing proposal then. As somebody said, it's a real concern trying to run this up the flagpole before we actually give real tax relief to our constituents. Kind of that juxtaposed look of what appears to be corporate welfare before getting actual tax relief to the people. So there's a certain order that they want to do it in. The proposal will allow the bonds to finance 100% of the construction of each of the two new stadiums with at least 30,000 seats. Well, the Chiefs aren't going to be playing for 30,000 seats.
Not a chance.
I mean, my guess it would be 65,000
Yeah.
seems to be the new magic number.
Yeah. Spilling water. Must be the shirt, I tell you.
Who taught you to drink?
Gotta get a sippy cup in here.
Yeah. Anybody have a straw? Yeah. So,
yeah, it's 60, 65. I think it's.
By the way, the current lease on each runs out at the end of the 2030 season.
Yeah, so you've got time.
They have plenty of time. Well, they have plenty of time. I would say you have time up until about 26.
26, 27.
Because you have to build it.
You got to build it. Absolutely.
Let's look at Las Vegas with the A's.
Yeah.
Except for the Tropicana, about to be imploded, they haven't done any work on that stadium yet.
Haven't done a thing. Now, I think you talk about 60, 65,000. I think the Bills Stadium is now going to probably set the precedent because you're looking at a team that obviously Bills fan base is one of the top 5 in football, and you're dropping the capacity there. So I think at that point now, you're probably going to have that, as you said, I think, without a doubt. It's 60, 65 probably going to be the norm, I think, for the rest of the league.
Yeah.
And, the Chiefs will be no exception.
Well, I mean, it's not like every legislator's on board. Democratic state senator, Tom Holland called the stadium proposal economic development for millionaires. He said it's total foolishness to have taxpayers subsidize the stadium, either through taxes they pay when they visit or because the state foregoes revenues that would flow into the coffers. Another northeastern Kansas lawmaker, GOP Senator Dennis Pyle, said, "We've got a lot of priorities in Kansas. I'm not sure this is one of them." Other lawmakers were critical of the legislature, had no public hearings or debates before 3 senators and 3 House members met in public this week to hash out the details of a proposal. As John Carmichael from Wichita said, and he's a Democrat, said, "As much as I would love to see the Chiefs and the Royals both in Kansas, this is a very large expenditure of tax money that merits careful consideration, not a last-minute scheme." Well, you do have to think it out. There's no question about that. But it's not as if Sporting KC and MLS actually plays in Kansas City, Kansas. The IndyCar racetrack in Kansas City is actually in Kansas as well. So it's not like Kansas City, Kansas doesn't have sports. It does. So we'll see how this plays out. Now, the $20 million question. What are you going to do? What are you going to do about the case of House versus the NCAA? As we've said for a few years now, that's the biggie. O'Bannon kind of set the table for this moment. It is set to come up for trial in January. So the judge in the case, I think it's Claudia Wilkin, I believe, she has ordered the 2 sides to sit down and see if they can hash out a settlement before they go to trial. That's standard, right? That's standard. And Trev Alberts, the new athletic director at Texas A&M, was telling his donors man, we're going to need another $15 to $20 million per year. Okay. And as I said yesterday, all right, let's not take this from the Penn State point of view. This is, boy, let's take it from the point of view of Pitt. Okay. And the reason I brought up Pitt is because they don't have the TV, they don't have the media deals that the Big Ten happen to have. They just don't. You know, we know that the radio contract is nowhere near in the same realm as Penn State's. We know that the TV contract is nowhere in the same realm as Penn State's. Well, how are they going to come up with 15 to 20 million? Yeah. How are they going to do it? And they don't draw.
No, don't draw enough.
They don't draw well.
No.
They draw well if it's Penn State, Notre Dame,
right. Notre Dame,
Ohio State,
yep.
And the backyard brawl game with West Virginia.
Brawl,
those games, you know, but Ohio State's not on their schedule. Penn State's not on their schedule. Nope. They get Notre Dame sometimes, once in a while, because it's a rotation with the other ACC schools. Yep. Backyard brawl they can control, but you get that game every other year.
No, and they're passionate enough of a fan base where one game a year will draw pretty well. Right. It's Florida State, Miami, but it's
I'm
not
being
a case,
critical here of Pitt at all.
It's not a case where they just don't draw enough.
Please don't. I don't want people to say, "Oh, he's backhandy." But not in the least. I'm using them as
it's a prime example of a team that just doesn't draw enough to come up with that money.
How do you get the 15 to 20? Your TV deal's about 36, 37 million a year. Your radio contract is, I'm sure, good, but it's not great. It's not in the upper echelon. Right? And your attendance is, for the most part, right? With a few exceptions here and there where you have some great games and you can sell out and so forth. And, and I don't know how many season tickets they have. I'm sure they have a fair amount of season tickets, but especially for people that want to see some of the bigger games. But that doesn't add up to enough to offset this. That's the issue. Because they're in the same boat as Boston College, as Syracuse, as Kansas State, as Miami, as Georgia Tech, as Texas Tech. I mean, they're in that boat, right? So the Big Ten and the SEC, according to Dennis Dodd, developing a revenue-sharing plan with players that would redefine everything. Okay. It's still not there yet, but they're calling it the modern model. It would not only share revenue with players, but also perhaps help settle the House versus NCAA lawsuit. It's a class action suit alleging the NCAA and power conferences have conspired to suppress athlete compensation. I know that you've felt every radio station in this town has done everything to suppress your compensation.
Right.
And Dewey, Cheatham, and Howell will be going.
They've not lost yet. They've been absolutely best investment I've ever made.
Okay, they are a no holds barred.
They are.
Okay.
Whatever it takes to win.
They say settlement money alone could cost universities between 15 and 20 million. Athletic directors have been frustrated, according to Dennis Dodd, trying to figure out how to rearrange their budgets or otherwise account for a payment of that size. We talked about what ESPN reported yesterday that the Power Four conferences are in deep discussions regarding revenue sharing plans. It's not clear where that revenue would come from or how it would be distributed. Again, I'll never forget when Mark Emmert took the stand in the Ed O'Bannon case about EA Sports. And everybody ended up getting. The players are all getting $600 right now,
right?
Out of the new game, plus they get the game, which is worth $70. And when Emmert took the stand, I fully expected him to get up there and say, hey, look, the money we bring in from football, the money we bring in basketball, the money we bring in from a game like this, we distribute it across the landscape so we can give opportunities to women's soccer players, men's soccer players, softball players, baseball players, women's gymnastics. I expected him to go through the litany of everybody who benefits from the dollars that are brought in by football, basketball, and corporate partnerships, including the one from EA Sports. Right? Mm-hmm. That's why I fully expected him to say. And you know what he said? None of that. He got up on the witness stand and he gave the court the ivory tower speech. What? Hey, well, the benefits of education and this and that and the other thing. Well, they're in the university, so I got it. There's benefits of education. But the money, yes, is going for education. But the money is going for opportunities and scholarships. They're not taking the money and putting it in a Swiss bank account and saying, hey, guess what? We're all going to Elba. We're going to have a great time on the island. Right? It's going to pay for everything else along the way. Mm-hmm. And he didn't do that. He gave the ivory tower speech. And, of course, the ivory tower speech puts everybody in the courtroom to sleep. They don't want to hear it. Okay? You want to look at people and look them in the eye and say, hey, how do you believe in the power of women's sports? And everybody like, well, mm-hmm. yeah, sure. I know she didn't put your hand up.
I'll tell you.
You're so backwards.
Right.
But you look at everybody in the
I didn't hear the question.
Oh, yeah. Oh no. Right.
Yeah.
But that's what you get up in the witness stand and say, yeah. How many of you believe in the power of women's sports? And every hand in the courtroom would go up. It says, this is the roadmap that we need to pay for that. I said, because they can't pay for themselves. I said, do we sell tickets to it? Sure. But does it match the expenses? No. It doesn't even come close. So you have to make up for all that money along the way so that we can run championships and programs can run. And that's what you talk about. I said, and then you could throw in, I said, and the key is all these, says, Penn State, for example, is 800, right? 800 student athletes, scholarship athletes. Okay? Well, 98 of them are in football and men's basketball. What about the other 702? Mm-hmm. Now, there are tenths and quarters and halves and fulls and, right? There's a various puzzle that puts it all together. But people are getting some sort of assistance through the money that is brought in, whether through fundraising, endowments, TV money, whatever it may be, that makes the whole thing run, which then opens the door for them to get, for them personally, a tuition-free education. They can get a degree. They can leave without debt. All right? Did he say any of that? No.
Not a word.
He talked about the student athlete and the value of a college and a degree, and everybody in the courtroom's like going, oh, my goodness, what's he doing? Of course, he's lousy at presenting anyway. You're like, oh. Tell him where the money goes. It's okay. Do it in general terms. You don't have to be specific. He wouldn't do it. Wouldn't do it. That's how you kick the can down the road.
No doubt.
That's how you get to a $15 to $20 million settlement. Guys like that. Now, the key to all this is the world-famous attorney Jeffrey Kessler. His name is all over a lot of these lawsuits. It's something that the schools hope that they can take to Kessler and say, here's something that we propose as the future model. Will you take this to settle as a future part of your case? Now, there's two parts to the House case. All right? The House suit claims that athletes are entitled to a share of television revenue as well as money for their likenesses appearing in video games from the past. All right. Now, the part of video games from the past I got, but I thought that was settled. because the game went out of business, and I think everybody got some sort of nominal.
Yeah, they got some kind of check. Yeah.
Like a really, it's not a big number.
No.
But they got that.
Yep.
Okay. If the case goes to a jury and the NCAA loses, they say the association could be on the hook for at least $4.2 billion. USA Today quoted a sports economics expert for the plaintiffs who said 7,000 current and former athletes would be entitled to money. Okay. The former athletes, I would have a difficult time saying, hey, they deserve money. Only because they've gone through the system. And did they take advantage of the system and get their degrees and things like that? And did they leave debt-free? And maybe a few of them had pro careers. Maybe some played overseas if it's basketball, whatever. Since 2021, major colleges have been stuck in neutral as NIL emerged as a largely uncontrolled way to compensate players. It kind of sounds like your checks. Furthermore, multiple lawsuits and court rulings have gone shockingly against who? The NCAA. Alston versus the NCAA basically stripped the NCAA of its ability to even oversee compensation. They are also facing 3 other antitrust cases. And by the way, I believe Kessler is involved in at least one of the 3. So the SEC and Big Ten have increasingly taken over the sport as not just leading stakeholders, but leaders, period. There's no doubt about that. Now, like this part here about the SEC and the Big Ten, I've known about for a little while. Haven't talked about it because I didn't think I was at liberty to really talk about it. That, hey, look, we got to do something here. And they're doing it. There's further evidence by the recent demand to receive a combined 58% of the college football playoff media revenue rights beginning in 2026. The conference's teams have combined, the 2 conferences, for 29 of the 40 CFP slots in the first 10 years. But the key is going to be, in the end, the number is going to be, if each school is expected to be in the $15 to $20 million range, where do you get the money from?
Yeah.
And again, here's my concern. It's not that athletes about getting money. There's nothing to do with that. I'm looking big picture here. Remember, I just talked about the 800 student athletes at Penn State. Well, let's take UCLA, for example. UCLA is a really good example. UCLA is going along, and they've had reduced attendance at the Rose Bowl. I mean, they were averaging, in 2016, I think UCLA was averaging like 77,000 fans a game.
Sure.
Now they're averaging in the 30s.
Yep.
Now they're hoping going to the Big Ten will change that attendance-wise. Yep. The stadium is 27 miles from campus. Right? And so, but there's no, okay, is there land around UCLA to maybe build a stadium? Yes. You want to know how expensive that land is in Westwood? With today's interest rates? That's why their lease with the Rose Bowl runs through 2044, just so you know. Oh, all right. But let's take them. So economically, they haven't been drawing as well at Pauley Pavilion. They haven't been drawing as well at the Rose Bowl. And the Pac-12 TV deal only gave them some relief. So between COVID and the other issues we outlined, which is something we've talked about many times before because we had to, based on the fact they were being absorbed into the Big Ten and why, we mentioned that going into last year, UCLA had a debt that the athletic department was $104 million in the red. 104 in the red. If they don't go to the Big Ten, what is the solution? Well, part of the solution would be they may have to cut 5 to 7 sports. Right?
Sure.
I mean, that would be something that would be brought up on the table. I don't want to do this. You're Martin Jarmond, right? You're the Chancellor, Gene Block, and Martin Jarman is the athletic director.
Yeah.
Do you sit there and tell me, hey, look, we're going to have to cut 5 to 7 sports? Well, then along comes the Big Ten, right? UCLA, USC, okay? Mike calls, the athletic director, he calls Fox. He says, hey, look, would it be possible? Didn't call Kevin Warren. Okay. So, you know, it's like the great hero. Wrong. Now, eventually Kevin Warren got involved, but the initial calls were made to Fox. And they said, hey, can we do this? Because let's give USC credit. They took a look at the landscape and said, we're not going to be able to get the kind of dollars that the Big Ten's going to get, because there were a lot of rumors swirling about what the Big Ten could get at this time, right? Mm-hmm. And so they're reading the tea leaves, they're hearing it, and, you know, Fox is in Beverly Hills. So it's not as if they can't make a, you know, well, there's no such thing in Los Angeles as a quick trip. But, you know, it's not like you'd say, hey, look, let's go over to Mastro's and meet for lunch, right? Mm-hmm. And let's talk about this. Sure. And they knew what the numbers had a chance to be in the Pac-12 versus the numbers that they could get in the Big Ten. And they knew how tenuous the Pac-12 situation was. So they get this open. UCLA then gets in. And for UCLA, this is the lifeboat. Suddenly out of nowhere, instead of maybe getting 35 to 40 million, if everybody had stayed together in the Pac-12, maybe getting 35, 40 million per school, right? Maybe 42 million a school. The door is open to them getting maybe 75 million a school and doing it over the final 6 years of a 7-year deal. Well, gee, you know, that's an extra $35 million per year, which closes the gap on your debt service, which puts you in a spot with Penn State coming out there, Ohio State coming out there, Michigan coming out there to go along with USC, where now the possibility of you getting back to averaging 70 to 75,000 a game in the Rose Bowl, which then, of course, helps, changes everything. So why am I bringing up UCLA with this scenario? Well, they're $104 million in debt. And believe me, the debt didn't get better in the past year. They still had the old Pac-12 deal. They don't have a Big Ten check yet. Right? Their attendance was not great last year, except for the USC game. And right, that's where they are. I remember last year we were talking about, the great Cal UCLA. Oh, they can't break up that rivalry. And I'm like, I said, they drew 36,000 fans for that great rivalry. I said, who are you kidding here? Like, I can read. Right? So I'm using them as an example. Yeah. Where do they come up with the 15 to 20 million when they're already fighting from behind debt-wise, and the Big Ten is giving them a lifeboat, but now the lifeboat's going to have a dent in it because of the 15 to 20 million. Not everybody can do it.
Right.
Can Texas A&M do it? Sure. Remember, their donors came up with the $77 million to buy out Jimbo. So they can come up with 15 to 20 for this. But that's what they'd have to come up with. So it's one thing to look at Texas A&M, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, whatever, to come up with the money. But it's another thing to look at UCLA, which is already fighting from behind financially. Right? What about Oregon and Washington? According to the stories, Oregon and Washington for the next 6 years are part of the Big Ten and a part of the Big Ten contract, but they're getting, quote, in the neighborhood of half shares. So they're not getting the full boat. They're getting about what they would have made if the Pac-12 had stayed together. right? If they'd stayed together, which is an increase over what they're getting now, but you got to come up with $15 to $20 million. Now, Oregon could probably look at Phil Knight and say, hey, look, hey Phil, how were the sales on LeBron's last year? How are the Air Jordan sales going? Hey, how about those Air Lords?
Oh, I'll tell you what, those sales are.
Or maybe I think they're called Air Jasons, aren't they?
AJs. Yep.
AJs. Air Jasons.
There you go. And then I get a cease and desist from MJ because of the J in it.
Well, it's not the first time you've had a cease and desist.
We're lawsuits.
You seem to be a target. But that's what we see here.
Yeah.
Right? Is that where do you come up with the money for it? It's one thing to say, oh, yeah, they did this, this, and this. There's only so much you can do. So now does UCLA go back and then sits in the conference room and says, hey, look, we got to come up with X amount. Let's just say, let's reduce it. Let's say 10 to 15. Let's not go with the higher end. Let's say 10 to 15. Let's say that's the number they have to come up with, right? Per year, by the way. Per year.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This isn't just about the past and take care of the past. That's a one-time payment. This is moving forward per year. So let's just say it's 10 to 15. Do you have to sit down in the room and revisit the possibility of which sports we cut here? Now, I thought COVID, I judged this wrong. I judged this wrong. I thought COVID, where everybody hemorrhaged tens of millions of dollars. I mean, people hemorrhaged a lot of money. There's nobody in the stands, right? That there would probably be sports cut because of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right, to kind of make up for it.
Yep.
And it didn't happen.
Didn't really happen.
Right? Maybe a few here and there.
Yep.
I know what, who was it? Was it Iowa that cut the tennis teams or something like that? Iowa cut 4 sports because they said Gary Barta came in and was kind of cold about it. I'm like, yeah, you guys are done soon. That's about what he did.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, really sorry. I mean, so it happened in a few places, but I thought you'd be hearing about it in many other instances because of the hemorrhaging of money from COVID. But it didn't happen. That's a great thing. But the question is with this, it's still a question that needs to be asked. Would you have to cut some programs to meet your bottom line, especially if you happen to be an athletic department that either doesn't have that kind of donor base, is trying to figure out how NIL is working. There's no collective bargaining right now. Oh, and by the way, our attendance doesn't match. And what do you do to ticket prices? Do you kick ticket prices up higher because of it, which then in turn you run the risk of potentially losing fans who are like going, I can't pay that. Let's increase parking. Again, I keep pointing out over and over again, you can't make the trip to the arena or the stadium a pain in the neck.
No.
You need to make it attractive. But at the same time, you're also faced with an economic challenge. How do you handle that challenge? Right? This sounds great until you sit in an athletic director's chair and say, okay, how do we handle this? This is real money here. How do we do this? And it's a puzzle. It's not as simple as like, hey, you're making all this TV money. Give them some of that. Well, not everybody's making that TV money. What do you think the American Athletic Conference is making for its TV contract? Conference USA, what are they making? They're not making that kind of money.
Right.
They're not. I mean, for goodness sakes, the ACC's not making that kind of money. Big 12, a little bit better than the ACC, but they're not in the same league.
No.
They're not in the same league financially as the Big Ten and the SEC. That's why it's the big two, the next two, and in basketball, the next three, and then everybody else. I mean, now the Big East, they only have to worry about basketball. They don't, they have schools that have football, but they're FCS schools, things like that.
Yeah.
They don't have to worry about this. But they would have to worry about coming up with it for basketball and other sports. They'd have to worry about it. Not 15, not 10 to 15 million per, or 15 to 20. But this is going to be something moving forward that, yes, a settlement would be good. A settlement would open the door for maybe 10 years of peace on this front. But it's going to come at a cost. And the cost is because the leadership of the NCAA, not the leadership of athletic departments, not the leadership of universities, the leadership of the NCAA has been kicking the can down the road for so many years that now they're boxed in. Now they're boxed in. And part of being boxed in is, what do you do with it? If this bill comes in, what do you do? And again, we don't know what the final number would be, and what if they don't settle and they go to court? Could be worse.
Could be worse, a lot worse. Sure.
Could be worse. I don't know. It is. Have I said the entire time that the athletes didn't deserve the money? No.
Nope,
I'm just saying.
time.
I'm just saying. You have to, when things like this happen, you have to explore the total big picture. Okay. Yes. Okay. You're on TV because of your team, whatever. We're drawing fans. Now, it's one thing interesting about sports. I mean, it's like the Penn State fan that sat there and watched John Cappelletti and Kajana Carter now watches Nick Singleton, right? Notice how the names have been changing.
Sure.
Right? The uniform stays the same, especially here.
Yeah, they tried that name on the back for about 2 or 3 years and said, no.
James was like, no, we're going back.
Yeah.
I remember Jack Ham called me and said, see, this guy gets it. I said,
Yeah.
But then you have to ask, okay, it's one thing to say, yep, they deserve it. Okay, great, we're all in agreement. But it's not like an NFL team. I realize the NFL doesn't have a $10 to $15 million payroll. It's
not quite. Yeah.
Right? It's exponentially higher than that. But you're taking care of 53 guys.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? You're not taking care of 800. Okay? There isn't a women's lacrosse team associated with the New York Giants. Okay? It's the New York Giants pay for the New York Giants. Now, Matt, I always love the salary cap number, right? Matches the TV number. Interesting. You ever notice that?
Of course.
Oh, yeah. All right. So the key is always, when it comes to the NFL, you don't need to look at anybody else. Just find out what the Green Bay Packers are doing. They're publicly traded, which means they have to put the numbers out there.
They got to put the number, yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Okay? Like, we don't know what Northwestern does, but everybody else has to put out an equity in athletics. Well, Big Ten's going to have 2 private schools now because USC is the other one.
Yeah.
But the numbers are there. Remember yesterday we were talking about Dartmouth basketball?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, and anytime we talk about the Ivy League, you get very uncomfortable. It's like
well, yeah, it's the dreams of going to Harvard were crushed. Yeah,
it's 7.
Oh, it took that long.
I'm going to West, not a community college. Okay, that's why you're still going to get a great job. You're fine. But the argument that was made, again, this is the parsing of words. In other words, can anybody just in plain English tell people?
No.
The truth? No. Nobody does it anymore.
They can't.
So we're going to sit there. They're a revenue generating sport. Yes, they are. As I pointed out yesterday, that if Jason and I decide to go to a Dartmouth game, which means on the trip I have to listen to them.
That's right.
Turn here. Like, Right. So Jason and I go to a Dartmouth, like the last game they played was against Harvard.
Right.
So, all right. So Jason and I decided to go to Hanover. We're going to go to the Dartmouth-Harvard game. The tickets were anywhere from $9 to $12 a piece. So let's take the high end because, we're big rollers.
That's right. High rollers got to go $12.
Right,
why not?
Right.
That's right.
We want really good seats at Lead Arena.
That's right.
So we go 12. Well, that means we gave Dartmouth men's basketball $24.
Mm-hmm.
So did they generate revenue from us?
Sure.
Yes. That's revenue generating. What they failed to mention in the regional NLRB meeting is that the expenses over here, this column on the right, appears to be an exponentially higher number than the column on the left that says revenue. Yes, you generated revenue, right? But if you were a ship, okay, your men's basketball program is the Andrea Doria. Okay, it's at the bottom after being hit by the Stockholm. Okay, yeah, you're done. All right, that's as simple as it gets. Right? Yes, you generate revenue. Yeah. Yes, they do. Sure they also generate a ton of expenses.
Yeah.
What do you think? They bus for free to go to Providence to play Brown? Right. What do you think? Hey, we're going to go to Philadelphia to play Penn. We'll go for nothing. Hotel, they give it to us for free. We're Dartmouth basketball. Meals, no problem. We're Dartmouth basketball. They just bring them over from WOWY. Great.
Yeah, none of that stuff costs money.
No, none of that costs any money at all.
No.
In fact, this year, let's just look it up. Dartmouth basketball. Okay. The unionized Dartmouth basketball.
That's right.
Dartmouth basketball. All right. So let's look at the schedule for this past year. Where did they go? Big Green basketball schedule. Oh, this is their football schedule. They lose money on football, too. Okay, so they play Fordham at home. Oh, these are all their home games. Princeton, Cornell. Oh, they got Brown at home. Maybe that's a game you and I ought to think about.
There it is.
Yeah. No? Not good?
Brown's fun. Yeah, absolutely.
They went 6-21 this year. Right? And they won their last game to get to 6. This is what I was telling somebody. I said, sure. I said, you know what? I said, let them unionize. I said, all right, now I'm going to go, you're 6-21. You aren't getting the job done. You're fired. Let's see. Let's see. I want to know what they play. They had to have played in a holiday tournament. Everybody does. Big Green hosts Harvard in season finale. I predict they win. What do you think?
I think so. Big time.
See, yes. Let me see here. Men's sports. Yeah, I want to get to the schedule part of it. I want to know where their tournament was this year. And that's what I want to know. Big Green hosts Harvard. Big Green can't overcome Ferrari shooting barrage. Lose by 22 at Brown. Something tells me that Ferrari was like part of the issue. Other than the fact that not really. But like they traveled all over the place this year. Okay? Because they had to. They didn't just play Ivy League games. Right? And because of that, I don't have their schedule here. For some reason, they don't want to reveal it. But I remember going down to a tournament in Tampa. and Brown and Dartmouth were both there. No, actually, it was Brown in New Hampshire. And I remember I said to somebody, I says, "Oh, great!" I said, "They traveled all this way." So this year they played at Duke. What do you think? Like, all right, how much money did it take to go to Durham? Okay, at St. Louis. At Vermont, they bust there. At Albany, they bust there. At Lemoyne, they probably bust there. At Sacred Heart, they bust there. At Vanderbilt, they didn't bust there. Then after that, it's all Ivy League. They played 4 straight home games. They actually beat Brown. Guy I went to high school with, Russ Tyler, is the color analyst for Brown.
Ah.
Yeah. Russ is a really good basketball player. I mean, really good. Then they played 3 in a row on the road at Harvard, Columbia, and Cornell. Now, they usually like group schools. And then March 16th to the 17th, which they did not participate in, Ivy Madness. But again, and my old friend Justin LaFleur, by the way, is the SID at Dartmouth. Revenue generating? Oh, yeah, they generate some revenue. They average 684 per game. That's not an exaggeration. That's the number, 684 per game. So they generate some revenue. And they have a small TV contract with ESPN. And then there's the expense side of it. Now, I don't know if the Ivy League would be part of this having to. But if they're all unionized, they're going to have to come up with some money for them.
Mm-hmm.
But what are they going to do with sports? I realize they have endowments and things like that, but they don't want to take their endowments and put it towards sports. Harvard's endowment is $40 billion. How about that? $40 billion. Stanford's got a gigantic financial endowment as well. They obviously haven't thrown it into the football program.
Well,
they're
paid
better.
their coach, but that was about it.
They're better.
After that.
And basketball, same thing.
Yeah.
But like, what are you going to do with those other sports? If you have to come up with, if you're sitting there and you're budgeting, you try to do budgets like 4 to 5 years out, your projections, there is not an athletic director in the country, Power 5, mid-major, whatever it may be, that was projecting out 4 to 5 years ago, looking to this particular time frame, saying we're going to have to come up with 15 to 20 million for athletes. There's nobody would have done that. Nobody. They're all going to have to do these budgets on the fly. And that's, I realize that there's a lot of positives that can come out of this for the student athletes and hopefully for the sports as well. But at the same time, some schools may have to be extremely creative as to how they do it because they may be forced to be creative. Kind of like the person that came up with that shirt.
That's right.
We started the show that way. We've come full circle. That shirt is a mess.